Some stories don't need words. They speak through emotions, through silence, through moments. Here every frame is a story, every pause is a message. Welcome to Tales Beyond Words, where silence speaks and feelings tell the tale. Stars frozen in time. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden rays on the polished wooden table that stretched across the center. Around it sat well-dressed executives, each with a leather folder open in front of them, murmuring softly and sipping sparkling water. Everything in the room spoke of elegance, wealth, and control. But she, Amelia Knight, stood still at the far end of the room, her expression unreadable. She had been silent throughout the meeting. The men in tailored suits had mistaken her quietness for shyness. Some thought she was there to observe. Others assumed she was just a junior associate, tagging along with her boss. But none of them had guessed the truth. Amelia was not there to make friends. She was there for the truth. The CEO, a tall man with silver hair and a charming grin, stood at the head of the table. "Well, I think that concludes our deal," he said, clapping his hands softly together. "If everyone's ready, let's sign and celebrate." Laughter followed his words. Pens were uncapped, hands moved toward the documents. But Amelia's hand did not move. She stepped forward, finally speaking for the first time. Her voice was calm and elegant, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Excuse me, but this contract is a forgery." A beat of silence, then another. Everyone turned to look at her. Some blinked in confusion, others frowned. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder, thinner, older, and slightly worn. She placed it gently on the table and flipped it open, revealing another copy of the same contract. Only it wasn't the same at all. "This is the original agreement," she said, tapping a line with her neatly manicured finger. "Look here, Clause 4B. In this document, the distribution rights are shared equally between both parties. But in your version," she flipped the page of the contract on the table, "it says full control will be granted to Apex Holdings." The CEO's smile faltered. For a moment, his charm dissolved, and what replaced it was something darker. But he caught himself and forced a laugh. "Miss Knight, I believe you're mistaken," he said. "That's an old draft. We revised the terms just last week." "No," Amelia replied, her voice still calm but now carrying a sharp edge. "The document you're holding was doctored. I verified the signatures. They don't match. The notary's stamp on your version is outdated and misaligned." Silence spread like ink in water. The senior legal advisor sitting across from her leaned in, examining both documents. His brows furrowed. He looked at the CEO, then back at Amelia. "She's right," he muttered. "The seals don't align. The print pattern's off too." Amelia's eyes moved from face to face in the room. She wasn't surprised. She had known this would happen. For weeks she had been gathering evidence, email trails, metadata, paper trails. The forgery was meant to slip past everyone, but she wasn't just anyone. A month ago, her company, Novatech, had signed a partnership deal with Apex Holdings. It was the biggest deal of the year. Her mentor, Novatech's founder, had trusted Apex Holdings. He believed in fair play and handshakes. But Amelia believed in facts, and when she noticed small discrepancies in the follow-up documents, she had started digging. The more she looked, the more dirt she found. And now, standing in this marble-floored room, she was holding the truth in her hands. "You see," she continued, now walking slowly around the table, "this deal was never about business. It was about power. And someone here thought they could rewrite the rules and walk away richer." The CEO stood straighter, his fists clenched on the table. "You're accusing us of fraud, Miss Knight." "I'm not accusing," she replied, turning to face him fully. "I'm proving it." The young assistant who had been standing in the corner recording notes on a tablet now looked unsure. Slowly, he stopped typing. A member of the press invited for the signing ceremony raised her phone and began recording quietly. Something was happening. Something big. Bigger than a business merger. The CEO's voice cracked slightly. "You don't know who you're messing with." But Amelia didn't flinch. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," she said, her tone turning colder. "And I also know the SEC will be very interested in this forgery." Murmurs rippled across the room. A few people began to stand up, distancing themselves from the head of the table. Others whispered into their phones. Amelia's expression didn't change. Her smile, the one she wore earlier when she walked in, was gone now, replaced with a gaze full of steel. The storm had arrived. The silence in the conference room was no longer awkward. It was dangerous, cold, heavy like a storm cloud moments from breaking open. Amelia stood firm. The once decorative atmosphere had transformed into a courtroom. The glittering chandelier, the marble floors, the polished table. None of them could protect Apex Holdings now. The CEO, Martin Wexler, swallowed hard. The pressure in the room was no longer in his control. His charm, his well-practiced smile, even the soft arrogance in his posture, all of it had vanished like mist in daylight. He glanced around at the board members. Most avoided his eyes. "I want this shut down," he barked suddenly. "Turn those cameras off." But it was too late. The journalist in the corner was already live streaming. Several assistants were whispering into their phones. One man near the back stepped out discreetly, no doubt calling legal counsel, or maybe an escape route. Amelia slowly placed both versions of the contract on the table. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every syllable she spoke was razor sharp. "You thought no one would notice," she said, eyes locked on Wexler. "You thought we'd sign, celebrate, and never look back. But the truth always has a way of showing up, sometimes in the form of paper, and sometimes in the form of people." Wexler's jaw tightened. "You don't have proof, you have a theory." "I have digital logs from your internal servers," Amelia replied calmly. "I have a whistleblower from your legal department. I have a time-stamped email from your assistant mistakenly forwarding the altered version to our junior staff. And just in case you're wondering," she opened her folder and slid out a flash drive. "I've already shared all of it with 3 journalists and our legal team this morning." One of Wexler's board members finally spoke up, his voice trembling. "Martin, tell me this isn't true." Wexler didn't respond. He couldn't. Because the truth was, he had gambled. He'd seen smaller companies crushed under the weight of forged contracts before. Amelia and her team were supposed to be just another stepping stone. He never expected her to be this prepared, this focused, this fearless. "You tried to bury us with paper," she said, stepping closer. "But I've been reading paper since I was 12. My mother was a lawyer. My father was a paralegal. This isn't just a job to me, it's my legacy." She turned toward the others in the room, the stunned employees, the silent board members, the suddenly uneasy journalists. "We trusted Apex Holdings, but trust once broken doesn't heal. It burns." A few minutes later, Novatech's legal advisor entered the room with 2 federal investigators. They had been waiting outside the building since morning, invited by Amelia as a precaution. Now, with proof laid bare and the world watching, they stepped forward to seize both versions of the contract and take statements. Tried one last bluff. "You'll regret this. You think this is justice, it's revenge, and it's personal." Amelia didn't flinch. "No," she said, "it's accountability, and it's overdue." The agents guided Wexler out of the room. His protests echoed briefly before the door shut behind him. The sound was final, like the slamming of a vault. An hour later, the press release hit the news cycle. Novatech exposes corporate fraud in historic contract scandal. Headlines followed. Whistleblower confirms Apex forged deal documents. And young executive uncovers 80 Mallorsor corporate fraud. The story spread like wildfire across business networks, social media, and news outlets. Amelia's name was everywhere, but not as a victim, as a force. Back in Novatech's downtown office, her team waited with bated breath. When she walked in, the room erupted in applause. She smiled, this time a real one. Not the polite kind worn for meetings. This one was full of relief, strength, and pride. Her mentor, Mr. Lawson, stepped forward, his eyes moist. "You saved us," he said softly. "You saved everything we built." "No," she replied, "we saved it together." That night, sitting alone on the rooftop of her apartment building, Amelia looked out at the glowing city skyline. She wasn't thinking of lawsuits or headlines. She wasn't thinking of the celebration emails pouring into her inbox. She was thinking about something her mother once told her. Never let the weight of silence bury the truth. If your voice shakes the room, let it shake. but speak. And she had. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come in a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives in the calm, steady voice of a woman unafraid to lose everything, because she knows who she is. The storm had passed, but its echo would remain, not as fear, as power,